I came home after a 10-hour flight, exhausted suitcase in one hand, expecting nothing more than sleep. Instead, the smart lock on my own front door flashed red. Access denied. Along the porch sat 6 black trash bags, filled with my clothes, my books, my life. Taped to the door was a note from my mother-in-law telling me to leave and make room for productive family members. What she didn't realize was that for 15 years, I had been the one paying for everything in that house. And the moment they kicked me out, they unplugged their own lifeline. The Uber's taillights disappeared down the street, leaving me standing alone in the humid dark of the driveway. It was nearly midnight. My shoulders ached from the 10-hour flight, and the only thing on my mind was getting inside, dropping my bag and collatesing into bed. I walked up to the massive oak double doors of the house. The same doors I had paid $20,000 to restore the year before. The porch light flicked on as the motion sensor caught me stepping forward. Out of habit, I lifted my hand and typed my code into the smart lock. Read. Access denied. I frowned, thinking I must have mistyped it. Jet lag. Exhaustion. I tried again slower this time, pressing each number carefully. Read again. Then the screen displayed a message. User Jennifer deleted. For a moment, I just stared at it, my brain lagging a few seconds behind reality. Deleted. That didn't make sense. My thumb hovered over the keypad as if the door might suddenly remember who I was. That's when I noticed the bags. 6 black trash bags lined up along the edge of the porch, swollen and overstuffed. The plastic stretched so tight the seams had turned pale. The floodlight above the door illuminated them like some kind of cruel display. I stepped closer and saw the piece of notebook paper taped to the door at eye level. The handwriting was unmistakable, my mother-in-law Elizabeth's sharp, jagged script. We need the space for productive family members. Go back to your parents. I didn't scream. I didn't pound on the door. I just stood there for a few seconds, breathing, slowly letting the information settle. My mind started doing what it always did under pressure analyzing, sorting, structuring. Like a system crash, finally, I bent down and tore open the first trash bag. My clothes spilled out, tangled with my daughter Ashley's stuffed animals and several of my architectural reference books. Everything had been thrown together carelessly, like it didn't matter if it broke or tore. But as I dug through the pile, something immediately stood out. My workstation wasn't there. No monitors, no server tower, no equipment. That was when I lifted my head and looked toward the detached garage about 50 yards away. The side door was slightly open. The gravel crunched loudly beneath my heels as I crossed the yard. The night air felt thick and heavy, but inside my head, everything had gone strangely clear. When I pushed the garage door open, the smell of dust and old oil hit me, and there it was. My entire setup had been dumped inside like scrap. The 3 monitors were stacked precariously on top of a pile of old tires. My server tower, the one holding terabytes of client data, sat directly on the stained concrete floor. Taped to one of the screens was another note. This one was written in Jessica's bubbly, childish handwriting. $200 a month. Pay or we trash it. Below that, she had even written her Venmo details. I stared at it for a long moment. Not anger, not panic, just clarity. The kind that spreads slowly from your spine to your chest until everything feels very, very cold. Panic is inefficient. I trained myself out of it years ago. This wasn't a personal meltdown. It was a system failure. And system failures have solutions. Carefully, I lifted the server tower first, then the monitors. One by one, I carried them back to the rental car waiting at the end of the driveway. Methodical, precise. By the time the trunk closed, the shock had completely faded because I had already realized something very important. This wasn't the end of my life. It was just the moment the system revealed who actually controlled the power. I closed the trunk after loading the last monitor and walked around to the driver's seat. The night had gone completely quiet. No voices from the house, no movement on the porch, just the distant hum of insects and the crunch of gravel under my shoes. Inside the car, I locked the doors and leaned back against the seat for a moment. I didn't start the engine. For the first time since stepping onto the driveway, everything stopped moving. My hands rested loosely in my lap, my breathing steady, my mind already sorting through what had just happened. Then my phone buzzed. A notification lit up the dark interior of the car. American Express. Transaction approved. I glanced down and opened it. The Prime Cut Steakhouse, $840. The timestamp read exactly midnight. For a second, I pictured the scene without even trying. Michael leaning back in a leather booth. Jessica taking photos of the table for social media. Elizabeth lifting a glass of wine like a queen celebrating a small victory. Steaks, vintage wine, expensive sides, all paid for with the same credit card belonging to the woman they had just locked out of the house. They had thrown my life into trash bags and then gone out to celebrate. My pulse didn't speed up. If anything, it slowed. That was the moment something inside me finally settled into place. For 15 years, I had told myself a story that I was helping family, that I was being supportive, that sacrifices were temporary, but the receipt glowing on my phone told the real story. To them, I wasn't family. I was infrastructure, a resource, a background system that quietly paid bills while they lived their lives. And resources can be disconnected. I opened the banking app. The blue light from the screen reflected off the windshield as I navigated to the credit card account. There it was, the same card currently paying for their celebration dinner. My thumb hovered over the option for half a second. Report lost or stolen. Confirm. A small loading circle spun on the screen, then a green check mark appeared. Card deactivated. Somewhere across town, their server was probably returning to the table with the bill right about now. Next, I opened the joint checking account Michael liked to use for appearances. The one he referenced when he talked about cash flow and conversations with people he wanted to impress. The balance filled the screen. Every dollar I had earned sitting quietly in an account he treated like his own. I tapped transfer. Destination my private business savings account. Amount all available funds. Confirm. The numbers disappeared from the joint account in seconds. Another green check mark flashed onto the screen. Then I selected the final option. Freeze account? Confirm. Again, the loading circle spun briefly before resolving into that same quiet green confirmation. Done. The financial oxygen line had just been cut. I set the phone down in the cup holder and stared out through the windshield at the dark silhouette of the house. The same house I had paid to renovate. The same porch where my belongings now sat in garbage bags. And strangely, my chest felt lighter than it had in years. They wanted me gone. Fine. But they had overlooked one very important detail. You can't evict the person paying the bills and expect the lights to stay on. I finally turned the key in the ignition. The engine came to life with a soft vibration beneath my hands. The headlights washed across the driveway, briefly illuminating the trash bags still lined up against the porch. I didn't look at them for long. There was nothing left there that belonged to me. As the car rolled backward down the driveway, the house slowly disappeared into the darkness behind me. And for the first time in a very long time, leaving didn't feel like losing. It felt like shutting down a system that should have been unplugged years ago. The hotel room was quiet in the way only hotels can be. Thick curtains drawn soft hum of the air conditioner, the distant glow of city lights bleeding through the glass. Ashley had fallen asleep almost instantly after we checked in, curled under the white duvet, still wearing her jeans. 13 years old enough to sense something was wrong, but still young enough to trust that I would fix it. I sat at the small glass desk by the window and opened my laptop. Not my email, not a message to a lawyer. Instead, I opened a folder buried 3 levels deep on my desktop. The folder was labeled Recipes. Inside it was a spreadsheet. To Elizabeth and Jessica, I was just Jennifer, the woman who spent all day upstairs in the attic office playing on her computer. The underachieving wife lucky enough to have married Michael, the brilliant venture capitalist who was supposedly building the family's future. That was the story. It was a convenient story, one that protected Michael's ego, and honestly, one I had allowed to exist for a long time. But the spreadsheet told the real version, line by line, column by column. Michael hadn't closed a real deal in 4 years. He hadn't had a steady job in 3. His investment firm was little more than a website I built for him and a collection of hopeful emails sent to people who stopped replying years ago. Meanwhile, my actual job existed in quiet conference calls and secure servers most of the family never even understood. I was a senior digital architect for a global infrastructure firm. I designed the virtual frameworks that Fortune 500 companies relied on to keep their networks running. When a corporation needed systems that could survive cyber attacks, data overload, or entire regional outages, they called people like me. My base salary alone was $320,000 a year. That wasn't including bonuses. The spreadsheet scrolled downward and each line told a small piece of the story. Historic estate renovation, $150,000, paid from my annual bonus. Ashley's private school tuition, $35,000 a year, auto-drafted from my personal account. Jessica's influencer launch parties, the ones that never actually launched anything except hangovers and blurry Instagram stories. Every bottle of champagne on my card. Then there were the smaller entries that added up faster than anyone ever noticed. Car leases, utility bills, country club fees, groceries, vacation deposits. For 15 years, I had quietly been the financial backbone of that entire household, and yet somehow the narrative had shifted. People always ask a simple question in situations like this. Why stay? Why keep paying? The answer is never dramatic. It doesn't happen in one moment. It happens slowly, like a pencil erasing a line over and over until the original drawing disappears. In the beginning, I paid the bills because Michael was between deals. I believed in him. I wanted to be the supportive wife cheering from the sidelines. Then the gratitude faded. What started as help slowly became expectation. And because I worked remotely, sitting in my attic office while everyone else ran around with visible jobs and visible schedules, the perception began to change. They stopped seeing the architect. They saw the housewife. Michael leaned into that illusion. At some point, he started repeating the lie so often that he believed it himself. He told his mother the money came from his crypto instincts, his connections, his next big opportunity just around the corner. And I let the lie stand because confronting it would have meant humiliating him. Over time, the roles flipped completely. The woman funding the entire system somehow became the burden inside it. The parasite. I stared at my reflection in the dark laptop screen for a moment. The woman looking back at me didn't look shocked. She looked finished, because the truth was simple now. For 15 years, I had been the invisible infrastructure holding that family together. Tonight, they had proudly unplugged the system. They just didn't realize yet that everything in their world ran on the power I had just turned off. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the hotel restaurant windows, bright and almost cheerful in a way that felt strangely disconnected from the reality I had left behind. I sat alone at a small table with a cup of black coffee, my laptop closed beside me. Ashley was still upstairs sleeping. The city moved normally outside, people commuting traffic, flowing waiters carrying plates of breakfast. But on my phone, a completely different world was unfolding. Notifications were stacking up one after another. Texts, missed calls, social media alerts. I watched them arrive the way a scientist might watch the readout of a failed experiment. Detached, curious. The first one that caught my attention came from TikTok. Jessica had posted a new video. Of course she had. I opened it. The caption read, "Finally clearing out the negative energy to make room for my baby angel." Underneath it were hashtags. Hashtag family first. Hashtag numereliches. The video started with Jessica standing dramatically in the doorway of my office. The attic space I had personally soundproofed and wired with business-grade fiber optics so I could work securely from home. She was holding a roller brush dipped in bright pink paint. "So guys," she chirped into the camera, "we are finally reclaiming this room." She stepped aside and spun the camera around to show the office, or what was left of it. The desk had been pushed aside. The cables I had carefully installed along the wall were hanging loose. Boxes were stacked everywhere. This room, Jessica continued smiling like she had just accomplished something meaningful, was basically being used as a storage unit for someone who didn't contribute to the family. Storage unit. The camera shifted again. In the corner of the room, Elizabeth was standing beside a pile of papers. My architectural blueprints. The design drafts for the downtown library project I had been leading for months. She grabbed one of the large sheets, crumpled it into a tight ball, and shoved it into a trash bag. Jessica giggled behind the camera. Out with the toxic, in with the love. I watched the video once, then again, and then a third time, not because it hurt, but because the level of confidence in it was fascinating. They weren't just kicking me out. They were rewriting the story in real time. In their version of events, the useless freeloader had finally been removed. The house was being purified. The family was healing. They genuinely believed that repainting the office erased the fact that I had built the office. 10 minutes later, another notification arrived. A text message from Elizabeth. No greeting, no hesitation. "Since you decided to run off to your parents' house instead of facing your responsibilities, send me the login for the utility account immediately. The internet is lagging and Michael has important VC calls this afternoon. Don't be petty." I stared at the screen for a moment and almost laughed. Michael's important calls. Michael hadn't had an important call in years. Most of his meetings consisted of online poker tournaments or fantasy football drafts that he played while pacing around the house, pretending to negotiate deals. But Elizabeth needed to believe the fantasy. Her son, the brilliant venture capitalist. Her son, the future mogul. And every fantasy needs a villain. Apparently that role belonged to me. Before I could even finish my coffee, the phone buzzed again. Voicemail, Michael. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. His voice came through smooth and confident, exactly the same tone he used when pitching ideas to investors who stopped taking his calls years ago. Jen, look, Mom's really upset about last night. You caused a pretty big scene leaving like that. It was embarrassing. I leaned back in my chair and listened quietly. But we talked, he continued, and we're willing to be reasonable here. Reasonable. If you come back today and apologize to Mom and Jessica, we can talk about letting you stay in the guest room for a couple of weeks. Just until you find a job or get back on your feet. There was a short pause. We're not monsters. The message ended with a soft beep. I lowered the phone slowly onto the table. For a moment, I simply sat there looking at the screen, reflecting my own face. They truly believed it. Every word. In their minds, I was the unstable one who had stormed off, the unemployed burden who needed temporary shelter, the woman lucky enough to be offered charity inside a house she had spent 15 years quietly funding. They thought they were negotiating from a position of power. They thought they were holding the cards, and that was the moment I understood something very clearly. You can't argue with people who have rewritten reality. You don't correct them. You don't debate them. You simply let the system run until it collapses under the weight of its own lies. I picked up my coffee and finished the last sip. They thought I was desperate. They thought I was scared. They thought I would crawl back, apologize, and accept the guest room in the house I had paid for. What they didn't understand yet was that the infrastructure of their entire world had already been disconnected. And they were still flipping the light switch, wondering why nothing turned on. I finished my coffee, wiped my mouth with the linen napkin, and walked back upstairs to the hotel suite. Ashley was still asleep, curled into the pillows like nothing in the world could reach her. I closed the bedroom door quietly and moved to the desk by the window. The skyline stretched across the glass like a circuit board. Buildings lit in neat rows. Traffic sliding along the streets below. I opened my laptop. It was time to stop observing. Time to start deleting. For the next 4 hours, that quiet hotel room turned into something else entirely. Not a place to hide. Not a place to grieve. A command center. When a corporate infrastructure fails, you don't panic. You isolate the problem, you secure the assets, then you terminate the unstable connections. I began with the professionals. The first call went to a forensic accountant named Robert. His entire career revolved around untangling financial disasters inside marriages and businesses, hidden accounts, forged documents missing money. The kind of person who treated spreadsheets like crime scenes. The second call went to a divorce attorney whose client reviews used words like terrifying and relentless. Perfect. I wired both of their retainers immediately from the funds I had secured the night before. No hesitation. No payment plans. Then I gave them the simplest instruction possible. Find everything. Every account Michael ever touched. Every loan. Every hidden debt. Every lie buried inside 15 years of financial fog. Robert sounded almost excited. The lawyer simply said, "Understood. Legal battles take time. Courts move slowly. Paperwork piles up. But systems don't always need to wait for court dates to start shutting down." I leaned back in the chair, opened the minibar, and poured a glass of Pinot Noir into the small hotel glass. Not a celebration, just something to sip while the maintenance work began. Because that's what this was, maintenance. The first system I opened was Michael's pride and joy. The Range Rover, he drove it everywhere, like he owned it. Valet parking at restaurants, pulling up to country clubs, letting the engine idle just long enough for people to notice. But he didn't own it. The lease was in my name. His credit score had never been strong enough to qualify for it in the first place. I logged into the leasing portal and navigated through the account menu until the option appeared. Request voluntary repossession. The form asked for a location. I typed the address of the house. Pickup time 8 a.m. tomorrow, right around the time Michael usually strutted out the front door, pretending to head to work. I submitted the request and watched the confirmation page load. One system down. Next came Jessica. Jessica didn't have a job. She had an audience. Her entire identity was built around social media, posting videos, live streaming daily routines, filming dramatic monologues about manifesting abundance. All of it ran through the same expensive phone plan, $300 a month, paid by me. I logged into the carrier account and scanned the usage data. TikTok, Instagram, streaming, hours and hours of it. One line caught my eye. Jessica. I selected the account. Action suspend service. The system asked for a reason. Technically, the phone wasn't stolen. But after 15 years of emotional and financial freeloading, it felt close enough. I selected device theft and clicked confirm. Somewhere, probably mid-scroll through her own comment section, her screen would go dark. Another system offline. I took another sip of wine and opened the next account. Elizabeth's crown jewel, the country club membership. For years, that place had been her kingdom. Luncheons, charity committees, afternoon cocktails with women who all pretended their families were perfect. What Elizabeth valued most wasn't the golf course or the dining room. It was the status. The membership account was simple. Primary card holder Jennifer. I navigated to the status page. Cancel membership immediately. Reason non-payment. But I didn't stop there. I flagged the card on file as invalid so that the next automatic charge would bounce publicly. There's a particular kind of humiliation that happens at a front desk when a card declines in front of people you've been trying to impress for 20 years. The system processed the request instantly. Another quiet confirmation message appeared. Then I opened the final account, the one that truly mattered. Utilities. The historic estate was beautiful in photographs. Stone walls, high ceilings, massive windows. But buildings like that are expensive to keep alive. Electricity alone averaged $600 a month. Primary account holder Jennifer. I hovered over the service options. Stop service. The system asked for an effective date. I selected today. Execution time 5 p.m. Just before sunset. Just early enough that the house would go dark before anyone expected it. I clicked submit. The screen flashed green. Request processed. I leaned back in the chair and looked out the window again. Cars moved through the streets, below tiny and orderly. Systems running exactly the way they were designed to. Back at the house, the systems were still running too, for now. The refrigerator humming, the air conditioning cooling empty rooms. The internet carrying Jessica's videos into the world. But every one of those things depended on a subscription. And tonight, that subscription was ending. Not with shouting. Not with smashed windows or slashed tires. Just a few quiet clicks. The kind that shut down an entire infrastructure when the administrator finally logs out. Robert called a little after 4 in the afternoon. By that point, the hotel room had grown quiet again. The laptop was still open on the desk, half a dozen financial tabs scattered across the screen, like pieces of a puzzle I had only just begun assembling. I had been expecting updates about hidden credit cards or maybe a forgotten investment account. Instead, the moment I answered, I heard something different in Robert's voice. Earlier that morning, he had sounded calm, methodical, like a man scanning numbers. Now he sounded heavier. "Jennifer," he said, skipping the usual greetings. "I just emailed you a document. I need you to open it and go to page 4. I clicked the notification that had appeared in my inbox. A PDF opened on the screen, filled with dense legal formatting and columns of financial terms. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "A loan agreement," Robert replied. "Second mortgage." My eyes moved slowly down the page. The address at the top made my stomach tighten. 123 Highland Estate Drive. The house. I didn't authorize a second mortgage, I said automatically. "The property's in Elizabeth's name. I only pay the primary mortgage." "Keep reading," Robert said. I scrolled. The loan amount appeared halfway down the page. $300,000. Then my eyes landed on the cosigner line, and that's where everything stopped. My name was printed neatly beneath the agreement. Jennifer Walker. Underneath it sat a signature. At first glance, it looked convincing. Same looping style, same long stroke on the J. But the longer I stared at it, the clearer the mistake became. The loop on the J was too wide, a small detail most people would miss. But when you've signed your own name thousands of times, you recognize the difference instantly. "That's not my signature," I said quietly. "No," Robert replied. "It isn't." He paused for a moment before continuing. "He used your credit profile and income verification to secure the loan. The lender approved it based on your financial history." My mind started racing through possibilities. "What were the funds used for?" I asked. Another pause. Then Robert answered, "That's the problem." I scrolled further down the document to the disbursement section. The destination account information appeared in a long string of numbers. Robert spoke again as I read. The majority of the money was transferred to an offshore sports betting site based in Antigua. My fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. There were also multiple transfers to a cryptocurrency wallet, he continued. According to the blockchain history, that wallet currently holds about $5. 5 out of 300,000. "This is fraud," I said flatly. "Identity theft and bank fraud." "Yes," Robert confirmed. "But it gets worse." I leaned back slightly in my chair. "Worse how?" I started cross-referencing the loan timeline with Michael's email records, Robert said. He mentioned several family loans in conversations with friends. I wanted to see where those came from. The screen changed as another document loaded. A bank withdrawal slip. $50,000. Date 6 months earlier. Source Elizabeth's retirement account. I frowned. "That doesn't make sense," I said. "Elizabeth would never give Michael that much money without a guaranteed return. She's extremely careful with her savings. She didn't give it to him as an investment," Robert said quietly. I waited. "I found an email chain between them," he continued. "Michael told his mother that you were facing legal trouble." My head tilted slightly. "What kind of trouble?" "He told her you were being sued," Robert said. "That you needed $50,000 immediately to settle the case, or you could go to jail." For a moment, the room felt completely still. "He also told her," Robert added, "that you had a large inheritance coming from a distant aunt. He said the settlement would be temporary and you'd repay her double once the inheritance cleared." The pieces started sliding together in my head, like a puzzle, finally revealing its full image. Elizabeth's hostility, the accusations, The constant comments about me being irresponsible with money. You're saying I started slowly. She thought she was saving me. Yes, Robert said. And he took the money. Yes, I stared at the screen. For years I had assumed Elizabeth simply disliked me, that she believed Michael's exaggerated stories about his career and saw me as the lazy wife living off her son's success. But this was something else entirely. Michael hadn't just been lying casually. He had built two separate realities. To me, he complained constantly about how demanding his mother was, how she expected him to succeed, how she pressured him financially, how she needed constant support. To Elizabeth, he told the opposite story, that I was reckless, that I was secretly spending money, that he was the responsible one cleaning up my mess. He had positioned himself in the center of both narratives, like a conductor directing an orchestra. Every lie carefully placed, every resentment carefully planted. The two women in his life blaming each other while he quietly drained both of us. Robert broke the silence. Jennifer, what do you want to do with this? I looked again at the forged signature on the loan document. $300,000 in fraud, $50,000 stolen from his mother. Years of manipulation stacked neatly between the lines. This isn't just divorce court anymore, Robert continued. These are criminal charges. If you move forward with this evidence, Michael could be facing serious prison time. Outside the window, the sun had begun sinking toward the skyline. I closed the PDF slowly. Print everything I said. Everything. Every document, every transfer, every email. Robert didn't respond immediately. Then he said quietly, "Understood." I ended the call and sat there for a moment in the silence of the hotel room. For years I thought Michael was weak, a dreamer chasing deals that never materialized. But the truth was far more disturbing. He wasn't just incompetent. He was strategic. A man who had built an entire ecosystem of lies and fed on the conflict it created. And now, for the first time in 15 years, I was finally looking at the full blueprint of the system he had built. By the time I drove back to the house that night, the estate was completely dark. Not the soft darkness of a quiet neighborhood evening. This was deeper. The kind of blackout that swallows an entire property. No porch lights, no glowing windows, just a heavy silhouette of stone and wood sitting against the night sky. The utility company had executed the shutoff exactly when they said they would, 5 o'clock sharp. I parked at the bottom of the driveway and left the headlights on. The beams cut a bright tunnel through the darkness, leading straight to the front door. For the first time that day, I wasn't sneaking away. I was walking back in. The smart locks were dead without power, so the front door opened with a simple push. Inside, the air was warm and stale without the air conditioning running. Faint candlelight flickered somewhere deeper in the house. I followed it. The kitchen glowed with a handful of emergency candles scattered across the marble island. Shadows stretched across the walls like jagged shapes as the flames trembled in the humid air. They were all there. Elizabeth stood near the sink, rigid and furious. Jessica leaned against the counter, clutching her useless phone like it might magically come back to life. Michael paced back and forth in a sweat-soaked shirt, his usual polished confidence replaced by irritation. When I stepped into the room, the tension snapped instantly. Elizabeth spotted me first. "You," she shrieked, her voice cracking through the room. "You ungrateful, spiteful little leech." The word echoed against the high ceiling. "How dare you cut the power," she continued. "Michael has been on the phone all afternoon trying to fix the mess you made." Michael stepped forward, trying to reclaim control of the situation. "You've made your point, Jen," he said, forcing a calm tone that didn't quite hide the panic underneath. "Canceling cards, turning off the electricity, it's childish." He wiped sweat from his forehead. "Turn everything back on, apologize to my mother, and maybe we won't pursue legal action for abandonment." I didn't answer him. Instead, I walked past him toward the pantry and retrieved the small, hard case containing my backup server drives. Jessica immediately shouted from behind me, "Put that down. That belongs to the house." I turned slowly and set the case on the island with a solid thud. "You keep using that word," I said calmly. Elizabeth's eyes narrowed. "Parasite." She crossed her arms. "Because that's exactly what you are," she snapped. "Living here rent-free while my son tries to build a future." A small laugh escaped my throat before I could stop it. Not warm, not amused, just sharp. "It's interesting," I said, looking directly at her. "Psychologists call that projection." She scoffed loudly. "A parasite," I continued, "is an organism that survives by feeding off a host. It takes resources and gives nothing back." I pointed slowly around the kitchen. "The Sub-Zero refrigerator," I said. $11,000. I paid for it. My hand moved toward the ceiling. "The roof replacement last year, $24,000. Then I pointed to the car keys sitting on the counter. "The Range Rover lease, every single payment." Finally, I looked directly at Michael. "I'm the host," I said quietly. "You're the infection." Michael lunged forward, his voice cracking. "Shut up, Mom. Don't listen to her. She's hysterical." "Am I?" I asked. I opened my bag and pulled out the stack of printed documents Robert had prepared. The papers hit the marble island beside the candles with a loud slap. Elizabeth I said, sliding one page toward her, "You asked where your $50,000 went." "The money you loaned Michael to keep me out of jail." Elizabeth froze. Her eyes moved slowly from the paper to Michael. "He didn't give it to me," I continued. "He sent it to an offshore betting site in Antigua." Michael's face drained of color. "And when that wasn't enough," I said, pulling another document forward, "he forged my signature to take out a $300,000 loan against this house." The kitchen went completely silent except for the faint crackling of candle flames. "You're not just sitting in the dark tonight, Elizabeth," I said. "You're sitting in a foreclosed home." Her hands trembled as she picked up the document. She stared at the numbers, at the forged signature, at the loan total. Then she looked up slowly at her son. "Michael," she whispered. He backed away immediately. "Mom, I can explain." Her voice exploded. "You stole from me." The scream tore through the room. "You stole my retirement. You stole my house." She lunged at him, grabbing his shirt, clawing at his chest while he tried to pull away. Jessica started shouting, panicking her voice, high and frantic, as the entire room dissolved into chaos. The alliance had shattered the moment the truth became visible, the moment the real parasite was exposed. I picked up the hard case containing my server drives. No one noticed. They were too busy tearing each other apart in the candlelight. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the kitchen. Behind me, their voices rose louder and louder inside the dark house. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Some systems don't need to be destroyed. Sometimes all you have to do is remove the power source and let them collapse on their own. 6 months later, the morning sun pours through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new apartment downtown. The space is quiet in a completely different way than the old house ever was. No echoing hallways, no creaking staircases. Just clean lines, open light, and the low hum of the city waking up below. Ashley is in her room, laughing on a video call with her friends. Real laughter. The kind that used to disappear the moment she walked into the tense silence of our old home. Hearing it now feels like proof that some things really can reset. I sit at the kitchen island with a cup of coffee and open my laptop. Out of habit, more than curiosity, I pull up the local real estate listings. Doesn't take long to find it. 123 Highland Estate Drive. The photos show the same stone walls and sweeping driveway, but the label underneath is different now. Bank owned. Foreclosure auction pending. For years, Elizabeth fought to preserve that house like it was a family crown. Something permanent. Something untouchable. Now it's just another asset on a bank spreadsheet. The family itself didn't survive the collapse either. Once the forensic audit proved what Michael had done, stealing from his mother, forging my signature, funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars into gambling and failed crypto bets, Elizabeth didn't defend him. She turned. Her testimony became part of the case against him. Michael is currently out on bail, living in a roadside motel while he waits for trial on multiple counts of wire fraud and identity theft. Elizabeth, meanwhile, lives in a small one-bedroom rental across town. Social Security checks no country club, no historic estate. Just quiet. I close the real estate tab and lean back in my chair. There's no rush of victory, no sense of revenge finally completed. What I feel instead is something much simpler. Balance, like an equation that took 15 years to finally resolve itself. I open one more file before shutting the laptop. The spreadsheet, the one hidden in the recipes folder. For years, it tracked every dollar that flowed out of my life and into theirs. Mortgage payments, tuition, car leases, club fees, endless columns of numbers quietly supporting a family that insisted I contributed nothing. I scroll to the bottom. One column labeled Family Support stretches down the screen like a long wound. Today, the newest entry reads exactly one number. 0. I highlight the entire file. Right-click. Delete. The confirmation window appears for a second, then disappears. Just like that 15 years of financial history vanish. I close the laptop and take another sip of coffee. The silence in this apartment doesn't feel empty. It feels expensive. And for the first time in a very long time, it belongs entirely to me. Jennifer learned something that no spreadsheet contract or sacrifice could ever guarantee. Respect cannot be purchased. The moment you have to pay just to be tolerated, the relationship has already changed. You are no longer family. You are a customer. Peace, she realized, comes from stepping away from transactions disguised as love. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own boundaries and feel free to like, share, or subscribe for more stories like this.